Episode 4 of Blue Planet is called Frozen Seas, and it's about the seas that were found at the poles. This episode is basically split in two halves. The first half is in the Arctic, the second in the Antarctic. We open up in the sort of winter, where there's these pockets in the sea ice, where the ice never melts, and that's kind of a refuge for a lot of animals. We see walruses in there, bowhead whales, belugas. So the sequence with the belugas is very good. We see this whole pod of belugas, they're trapped in this one area. They can't really go anywhere because if they go anywhere else, they're not going to be able to breathe, and they'll die. However, that does make them vulnerable to polar bears. Basically, I see this one polar bear diving in a few times after them. It's very weird. I don't think I've ever seen that before or since. We obviously saw polar bears hunting belugas in Seven Worlds, One Planet, but I've never seen a hunt like this, and it's interesting to see that a one polar bear actually managed to get one. So, I mean, the crime in the city. So it's quite interesting to see that, because again, it's not something you'd obviously think. You wouldn't think, you tend to think of polar bears as hunting seals. You never really think of them taking on belugas. And we see that Arctic foxes are basically dependent on the polar bears for food. They obviously scavenge them. Then we look at the various seals that live there. We see harp seals. They give birth in the ice. Obviously their pups are really cute. We briefly see them. We see hooded seals. They have this weird membranous skin on their nose that they can inflate to intimidate each other. They're quite interesting. The bit that I found really interesting there was talking about how their pups only suckle for 4 days because they're at risk of polar bears. Didn't know about that. The sequence of the hooded seals also appears in The Life of Mammals. It was filmed around the same time. A lot of footage in this episode actually does appear in Life of Mammals. I'm pretty sure the Arctic fox stuff does as well. Certainly the next sequence, which is the ringed seals and the polar bears, that's really good. That definitely reappears in Life of Mammals, and I think in more detail. We kind of see it a lot more from the polar bear's perspective. Ring seals give birth in sort of polar bear country, so they have loads of dens under the ice, which the polar bears can smell out. We see this one female with her cub try to break through various dens. It's an interesting sequence again. It's the most in-depth look at polar bears we get in the episode. And then we see the summer in the Arctic. We see walruses, belugas, narwhals, bowhead whales. We spend quite a bit of time with the bowhead whales. We see that they're the only whales that basically live in the Arctic all year round. And they also have the largest mouths of any animal, which I didn't know about, which is quite cool. We also see polar bear swimming. That's something we see again in Planet Earth, and I think was done more epically in Planet Earth. But this was probably the first time they ever saw it, and it was probably quite eye-opening for people, because this was around the time that we started to talk about things like global warming, and the image of a polar bear swimming in an ice-free summer was quite haunting at the time, and really hammered home for a lot of people the effects of global warming. So that was quite interesting to touch on here. I think while that might not be as effective nowadays, especially having seen other footage that's probably better, it probably did hit home quite a lot in 2001. Then we move to the Antarctic, where we see emperor penguins. We see emperor penguins in the winter, huddled together. That's something we've seen in Planet Earth extensively. The fact that we've seen this better elsewhere does make it feel a little bit lesser. And we talk about Weddell seals. They're the most southerly breeding mammal. We see that they make these pockets in the ice so they're able to breathe all year round, and how it wears in their teeth is a bit bleak, talking about how a lot of Weddell seals just die young because their teeth are eroded and they can't actually feed. Interesting though. Krill as well. Krill are quite an important part of the Antarctic food chain. We see a lot of them basically just climb to the bottom of the ice and feed on algae. Considering they're quite well known and of course very important for a lot of animals in the Antarctic, it's nice to have a little more information about them, because I feel like we just kind of take them for granted. We just see, oh, there's krill here, and that's kind of all we get normally. And we talk about chinstrap penguins. We basically see that they've been at sea for a long time, and they nest on this volcanic island, which is the largest penguin colony in the world. And to get there, they have to past these really, really horrific waves. We saw that in Planet Earth 2 in more detail. However, what I like about this sequence is there's no slow motion, and so you really get an idea how really horrific this situation is. It really feels really harsh. We see when the summer comes, there's a lot of krill. That attracts a lot of whales, like minke whales, humpback whales. Seals as well. These big krill swarms are really important. Then we get to the sort of meatiest part of the Antarctic sequence, which is the emperor penguins. So we see the emperor penguins in the summer, they're heading back to the sea. And this is the bit we didn't see in Planet Earth, which I'm glad we didn't, because we get a quite extensive look at it here, which is the emperor penguins having to get back to the sea and bypassing leopard seals. So leopard seals, again, really iconic. They do talk about how leopard seals are essentially the polar bears of the Antarctic. That's a fair comparison. They are basically the top predators outside of orcas. And we see that they're basically going after the penguins. We can see them going on land, but they hang around and sort of ambush them. The penguins are kind of unsure about what to do, but when they're lured into a false sense of security, they dive in, and the leopard seal inevitably gets some of them. This is a really good sequence. I like how it sets up the tension that the penguins feel for the leopard seal. And we do get quite a lot from the leopard seal's perspective as well. The leopard seals are usually vilified in these programs. Not so much here. You do kind of see the leopard seal's perspective. You see how it's quite a cunning hunter. The only criticism I would say of this sequence is that we don't actually see the leopard seal catching anything. Usually we do, to be fair. We just kind of see a lot of shots of the leopard seal swimming around with the penguins, and it's kind of all mashed together, and we see it's got a penguin in its mouth. I mean, we've seen leopard seals take on penguins before. We've seen them, catch them, kill them, butcher them. We've seen that quite a few times. We saw it before this in Life in the Freezer, which was the first time they'd ever filmed that. So they probably were never going to top that. So I kind of get that they didn't need to show it, but it kind of feels a bit like they just couldn't get it, so they made something out of nothing. But still, all right. So yeah, really good stuff. And I like how it ends on the penguins actually swimming. It'd be easy to show them going back to their chicks. I'm glad they actually chose to focus on the ocean, because this episode does kind of run the risk of kind of straying away from the oceans, because the poles are quite iconic habitats. I'm glad they generally kept it within theme of the oceans in this episode. We didn't feature things like musk oxen or anything, or snow petrels or anything like that. It was very much the animals that live on the coasts in the ocean that we focused on. That was good. Then we get the diary sequence, and it's kind of a bit about everything. It's probably the best one of the series so far. It's basically it focuses mainly on Doug Allen in the Arctic filming polar bears. Great stuff. He's great. I mean, Doug Allen, as I said before, great guy. He's from the same county as me, so a fellow Scot and a fellow Fifer. Perfect. You do get a feeling of how difficult some of the shots were, him going after the polar bears, and the polar bears just running away. It's kind of the opposite of the Planet Earth diary sequence featuring him. He basically is following this polar bear for ages, and it just kind of loses trust in him, and is eventually able to get it to trust him. That's quite good. During the credits as well, it basically said Doug Allen did all the photography, all the main photography anyway. Quite unusual for that. I'm used to seeing quite a lot of names under that heading, and he was the only one there, so fair play on. So yeah, this episode is quite good. I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more than the last episode. There wasn't an abundance of bait balls. I feel like all the stuff in here is stuff I'd seen since for the most part, but I still enjoyed it. The highlights are probably the polar bears and the belugas. I did like the emperor penguins at the end though. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here to like. And yeah, I enjoyed it. So yeah, what were your thoughts on this episode? Did you like it? What were your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. Next week I'll be doing the seasonal seas episode, so temperate waters. And yeah, I'll look forward to that. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. But I appreciate it if you do. But if you don't want to, it's fine. And yeah, I'll see you next week, and goodbye.